Tera raids were a frustrating failure for Pokémon. A brilliant idea and multiplayer concept, tainted by poor execution and performance. I recently made an hour-long video discussing the entirety of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, and to keep it down to 1 hour, I had to shorten some sections significantly. So every so often, I'm making a video expanding on a few of the talking points. Today, I want to talk about my biggest criticism of Pokémon Scarlet and Violet, Tera raids. Let me start this by saying, I love the Terrestrial battle gimmick. In my mind, it's the best one we've had so far by quite a ways. It's dynamic, it's creative, it looks beautiful. I've never been a huge fan of the crowns above the Pokemon's heads, but I've gotten used to them over time. Much like the Dynamax mechanic that preceded it, this gimmick also goes beyond trainer battles, and allows you to seek out what are essentially wild boss battles, by interacting with special dens dotted around the region. These Pokemon have random Tera types, and you're strongly encouraged to team up with other players to strategize and defeat these terrestrialized Pokemon. I was extremely excited for these raids in the run-up to Pokémon Scarlet and Violet's release, because in the promotional trailers, they looked like Dynamax raids on steroids. They looked like so much fun to participate in. So what exactly went so wrong with Tera raids? The problems can start before you even enter a raid. If you're using the online portal to try and join a Tera raid, be prepared to sit and wait an entire minute before the game tells you you weren't able to join. Why it takes so long, seemingly the exact same amount of time every time, I don't know. I assume this is some online server issue I'm not too clued up about, but once you hit join, you are trapped here until you either get into the raid or get rejected from it. There's no way to cancel the attempt to join that raid, unless you close the game completely. But you don't want to and shouldn't have to be doing that. And that wouldn't really be any quicker anyway when you think about it. Like I said, I feel like this may be a server thing, but the raids in the online portal are often unavailable within seconds of the page being refreshed. It's a frustrating farce, especially if it's a Pokemon you need for the Pokédex. Once you've got yourself into a Tera raid, the real fun can begin. Now, one of the things I was really looking forward to with Tera raids was how free-flowing they were pictured to be in the run-up to Scarlet and Violet's release. It looked like everyone could just attack and throw out cheers without having to wait for what everyone else is doing, which was a bit of a complaint from many people with Dynamax raids, where everyone picks an attack and then we go around the room and judge each other's choices. But in reality, it doesn't quite go down as smoothly as they seem to in the trailers. If the raid boss wants to do something, whether that's clearing a stat, putting its shield up, or whatever else, it will bluntly disrupt whatever you were in the middle of doing to pull the attention back onto itself. The menu disappears and you're forced to just wait for it to come back again, which sometimes can take a while. And that's another issue in itself. Sometimes these raids will just freeze, the menu will never come back, and all 4 players are standing there unable to do anything. At this point, the only option you have is to close the game and load back up. So hopefully you saved your game fairly recently. Things in here are very messy and disordered. It feels like you're fighting against the game itself to do the most basic of things. If you didn't play Pokémon Scarlet and Violet on launch though, you can consider yourself as having it pretty good compared to what a lot of us had to go through. In the earlier days after release, if someone left the lobby pre-raid, that space would never fill back in with another player. Another player might have joined, but you wouldn't know for sure either way until you entered the raid and either saw a real player with a strategically chosen Pokemon or an AI with a Mudstale. The HP bar was bugged when certain attacks were used. Play Rough comes to mind first. So you wouldn't actually know how much HP the raid boss had left. Sometimes a clone of your Pokemon would appear in the center of the battlefield. I ended up on an online article when it happened to me on stream once, and a bunch of other miscellaneous buggy occurrences here and there. By far the strangest I encountered was one I tweeted about last year, and I'm just going to read this out for you so it really drives home how wild this was. I might have to change a few words for clarification. The weirdest Tera raid glitch I've seen yet. I brought Umbreon, but for some reason I'm controlling my ally's Ceruledge. My Umbreon faints, and a duplicate of my ally's Ceruledge replaces it. The OG Ceruledge, my ally's, faints, and gets replaced by the third ally's Scizor, that ally now having a duplicate of the fourth ally's Tauros. This was just mind-bending. I have no idea what was going on here. So yeah, it was extra rough in the beginning. Most of this stuff has since been patched out, thankfully, but that last thing I talked about was about a year after release. I often forget all about the little quick chats we have available in Tera raids as well, because they're about as useful as a Snorlax in a sprint race. Not that people are even paying attention to them anyway, but even if they did, it's the same issue as everything else. By the time you've managed to select it and get it out there, it's too late. Someone's already attacked too early and ruined the strat. I feel like they needed to be one-button activations, maybe using the corner triggers of the Switch. What would have been better than that is if you could have set those quick chats to whatever you want. Physically be able to set up custom short messages and assign them to those 4 buttons, and you could shoot them out with one simple button press in raid. Like, don't attack until I say, or we need to heal, etc. Okay, Editing Craig is going to jump in here and say that maybe that wouldn't be the best idea. Letting people type in whatever they want, let's be honest, that wouldn't end well, would it? Imagine being in a raid and seeing someone spam sub to AOKCraig over and over again, because that's totally the worst thing people would do with it. But maybe just having a dozen or so different preset options to assign to those 4 quick chat buttons would be the best move. Okay, carry on. I also think that not having a good enough chance to beat the higher level raids on your own is a little crappy for players coming into the games a little later down the line. Anyone picking up these games now, a year and a half to 2 years after release, is going to struggle with those higher star raids because there simply aren't as many people doing them anymore. Recently I've noticed there aren't nearly as many people jumping into random raids now to farm items or whatever else. Most of the player base has everything they need now, and also the novelty of just jumping into random raids has long since worn off. And those higher star raids need multiple people really, unless you're willing to study and cook up some bold solo strat. There really should have been a proper solo mode for Tera raids, I think, where the HP bar isn't quite as big. That's really the only change you'd need to scale it down from 4 players to 1. Maybe scaling in general could have been a good thing, so the HP bar scales depending on whether there's 1, 2, 3 or 4 players in the raid. Because having NPCs in these raids to begin with has always seemed pointless to me. They don't make a difference. I mean, in Tera raids, it at least seems like they sometimes copy the Pokemon you've brought in, but still, the AI isn't sophisticated enough to help in any meaningful way. So yeah, I do feel for the people that have picked up Scarlet and Violet later down the line. It's more difficult for them for sure. There's an over-reliance on multiplayer with the higher star Tera raids that's gonna make them borderline unplayable once the game reaches a couple of years old. I try not to go through whole videos purely complaining and criticising, but it's genuinely difficult to find positives from Tera raids. Like I said at the very start of all this, Tera raids were a brilliant idea, such a good idea, but they never lived up to the potential they should have. They deserve to be as good in reality as the concept was. And this is the thing, Tera raids have been and continue to be the vehicle for many event Pokemon. Mightiest Mart Pokemon have been a regular thing since the game's release. A couple of Paradox legendary Pokemon are locked behind Tera raids, when those events occasionally circle back around. There's a pretty important need for these raids to function well, but they just don't. Even after some of the early bugs and glitches were patched out, they're still overall not a nice experience. How do you guys see Tera raids? I feel like I've been very harsh, but it is purely out of grief for what Tera raids could have been. But maybe some of you see it another way, so please drop any thoughts and opinions you have in the comments. Always interested to hear other viewpoints on these things. While you're down there, drop a like on the video, it helps push the channel along a bit. Subscribe for more Pokemon content. Take it easy guys, thanks for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next one.